The Avengers Assemble and that. It is issue 368 of the Avengers. Part I of V of the Bloodlines crossover. This crossover was to celebrate the 30th anniversary of both the Avengers and the Excellent Men. And some people really hate when those two things cross over. But this one made the smart move of realising the Flash is the perfect bridge for an Avengers and Excellent Men crossover, as he has strong ties to both worlds. I like the cover here. We have got two Avengers, two Excellent Men, and then the family unit that the story focuses on. Mr. Magnet's children, his grandchild, and his daughter-in-law. Steve Epting cover, and he also does the interiors. This had been built to, and we enter the story with a major event having already happened. And that is that Mick Hucknall, the man behind Simply Red, he has kidnapped the Flash and Iris West's daughter, Kid Flash. He has done this because he wants to use Mr. Magnet's legacy for his own agenda. And I have been engaging with comics for nearly 20 years now. And I used to post on a lot of forums and stuff. And the opinion on this crossover was that it was dog shit. That it was a terrible 90s story filled with bad art, nonsensical melodrama, continuity errors, and issues that contradict themselves. Everyone thought that. And then when I eventually read it for myself, I discovered very little of that anyway. Yeah, there are tiny examples of that, but nowadays, I didn't bother to consider other people's opinions. I have my opinions. I will listen to people I respect, or people who present a legitimate argument with more than a single sentence dismissal of a piece of the comic. But comic book fans, they are some of the worst for parroting each other or accepting something as terrible because so-and-so says that it is terrible. Yes, I am thinking of Kurt Busey as so-and-so there. Bloodlines is actually pretty decent. The story, it isn't as lavish or over the top as a 30th anniversary crossover probably should be. But it has a clear story and a sensible reason to bring the teams together. Anyway, what we all really want to see is this image across 2 pages with all the then Avengers gathered and ready for action. Remember the good old days when Spider-Girl and Iris West were considered major Avengers before it became a clique of Michael Bryan Benson's favourites. Thanks Michael Bryan Benson and editor Tom Beevort for making the Avengers feel smaller than they were before you. With this though, I have a criticism. Where is 90s 4? 90s Thor was an Avenger at this point, and not having him around for a crossover is very lame. This is written by Bob Patrick Harras, and one thing you will notice is that he benches half the characters here, just like he did in Operation Galaxy Quest. In fact, some of the characters he benches in Bloodlines are the exact same characters he benched in Operation Galaxy Quest. And then some of the other characters he benches, like Hercules Man and Vision, make zero fucking sense. Two of the most powerful and most experienced Avengers here. Let's take someone relatively new to the team like War Machine, and an obviously underpowered character like Darth Knight, but leave the demigod and the synthetic behind. So I have started with some criticism there. Bob Patrick Harras clearly had his favourites, and then ones that he didn't care about. Or maybe actually, he couldn't write about 20 characters at once. Some would say that he couldn't write one character at once. It is at its core a simple story. A baby has been stolen, and the Avengers want to go to Kenosha to save it. And truth be told, where else are you going to get to see Darth Knight or any hero punch what appears to be a baby? All the miserable people who ate this on principle because it was a 90s story are missing out on gold. We will get to the positives now. Unlike in Operation Galaxy Quest, Bob Patrick Harras actually does use U.S.Agent in this story. That pleases me greatly. U.S.Agent, he has his own subplot really. Him and the Smurf, they are involved with a diplomatic mission with Dr. X and Peter Guy Ritchie. They are also going to Kenosha, the muty slave island of Kenosha. I like the dynamic between Smurf and U.S.Agent. That is fun. And I appreciate that the story doesn't have U.S.Agent be an internal antagonist or a big bother. Maybe my entire opinion on this crossover is based on them not benching U.S.Agent again. At the other end of the story, we have the Excellent Men. And at this time, the Flash was with the Excellent Men. This was a very brief moment in time. The Flash, he had been with Extra Factors for a few years. And then during the Fecal Attractions storyline, he kind of graduated to the proper Excellent Men when they were planning an attack on Mr. Magnets. He even had an Excellent Men costume with an X on it that he never wore for longer than 2 issues. The Flash is one of my favourite Marvel characters. So this story being a Flash story at its core is good with me. That could be another reason that I don't hate it. Or maybe it is just an okay story that anonymous people on the internet 20 years ago loved to slam because it was easy. It was from the 90s. It was a crossover. It had Excellent Men characters, not written by Christopher Clairvoyant. It was the same easy pickings they all feast on and dogpile on because they didn't have many opinions of their own. I'm not saying anyone who hates this story is like that, but the idea of a mass hive mind agreement, this is a bad story, is fucking bull. I will say, the Excellent Men, their involvement in this story, their activity, seems a lot less important than the Avengers. And believe it or not, Wolfman isn't in this story anywhere. As I just said, this follows on from Fecal Attractions, and that was a story where Mr. Magnets tore Wolfman's metal skeleton out of his body. So Wolfman is taking a break from the Excellent Men to recuperate and become Brendan Fraser in Encino Man. You're making it very hard to defend these 90s comics, Marvel. This issue has a lot of setup with the UN and the SHIELD and the Avengers, Ganon against government orders. They have been forbidden from inserting themselves into Kenosha's problems, but they need to gan there because that is where Mick Hucknall has taken Kid Flash. So we begin this story with the Avengers disobeying the United Nations. And this will be a huge, important event for Avengers continuity because they lose a lot of official backing and the West Coast team ends up taking the brunt of it. I did review parts of this story a long time ago, but I think I might look at the whole thing if people want me to. The 5 parts, and then what I consider the 6th part. You can look forward to me pointing out things people criticised years and years ago, and explaining how they really don't seem to be able to read an issue because it was clearly shown in the issue before that U.S.Agent was not left behind. And if you think Mick Hucknall from Simply Red isn't a very compelling or intimidating enemy for a crossover to be centred around, you're right. He isn't the main bad guy here. He is a bad guy, maybe even a main bad guy, but the real focus is on another, slightly more powerful and even formidable opponent. Do people want me to look at the rest of this? I love The Flash, and I like and want to love this story. I like a lot of the art in it. Junior's issue has some iffy bits, but the rest of the art is of its time, but I think quite good. Steve Epting, a cue ball, Bob Ross, and Junior. Not a bad collection of artists on Bloodlines. There could be a little more focus on some of the characters besides the ones doing stuff. But I find Bloodlines to be one of, if not outright, the best Avengers and Excellent Men crossover story. I have got 7 thumbs to put up for this issue.